Hello and welcome to Chats, a television podcast, Season 16, Couch Madness. 16 shows enter, one emerges as the show that we will watch for the remainder of our season. Who will win, who will lose, and who will die? My name is Magellan, and I'm joined by someone who's got nothing left to lose but their teeth. It's Alan.
Oh, God, as somebody who does not like teeth getting pulled whatsoever, the scene in reference is gruesome. Unfortunately, they cut around a lot of it, but hi! Hello! Welcome, everybody. It's season 16. Hi. As Magellan mentioned, this is a bloodbath of a season. We we finally decided Couch Madness is the title until we have a number one spot. You guys voted at home. We had 32 shows. You narrowed it down to 16. And now we are going to systematically be discussing them one episode at a time each until a winner emerges. I'm so excited to be here. I'm like buzzing with hype right now. Because first of all, I love doing this. And second of all, we've got some great shows to discuss tonight. How are you doing, Magellan?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm excited to launch this new season, this new thing, and see which show survives the Coliseum of Controller, the arena of
Analog.
Tune your antenna to the death zone.
The digital deathmatch, the analog arena.
Blood will be streaming.
Ooh.
Thank you so much.
What are we talking about?
What weapon would you choose? Sorry, if you were in the gladiator pit.
Ooh.
Would you be a trident and net person?
Trident and net?
Yeah.
I see the value, especially those nets with like the little balls on them, like the heavy balls.
Yeah.
I get it. No, I think I would be like a light flail. Not a mace, but like a flail.
Tasteful.
Mm-hmm. Friend of the podcast, Jim, recommended me this VR game a while back called Gorn, which is just like, here's an arena with a bunch of weapons. You can go swing around and beat guys up. And I always loved the flail in that game because it's so satisfying to be like, spin, 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 whap. And I would love to do that to other bad people. What about you?
Gosh, I think I'd go with the trident net if I'm not allowed to do that. I think some kind of a spear shield maybe or something.
Oh, yeah.
Just
I use
a lot of people far away from me.
Keep a distance. I use a lot of spears in Zelda. I've noticed. I've sort of developed a spear build, not intentionally, because you just use what you can get. But I've been using a lot of spears in that.
Tip for you: you can fuse a shield to your spear. Do you know that?
What does that do? What does it accomplish?
Well, it allows you to block.
Oh, wait.
Because when you're just holding the spear, you can't use a shield because you're using it two-handed.
Oh.
But if you fuse a shield, it puts it in the middle of the spear shaft, and then you can block with it. So it's kind of fun.
That's really fun. Yeah, I dig it. I respect it.
Yeah. Anyway, let's talk turkey, and by turkey I mean TV, and by TV I mean blood. So we watched two shows for our first matchup of the first round of our tournament of television. Now, if you want to know the bracket, it's linked in the show notes, the challenge, so you can take a look at the bracket as it's unfolding over the course of the season. And of course, listen to our previous episode if you want to understand how the seeding and the actual contenders for this tournament were chosen. We dove really far into that last week. But this time around, we are matching up our 16th seed, Alias, against our first seed, Stargate SG-1. And we decided that we are going to watch and discuss shows in seeding order, reverse seeding order. So the show that's seeded lower, we're going to talk about it first, which means that we are going to first discuss the pilot to Alias, and then we'll discuss the pilot to Stargate SG-1. We also decided last week that we would be watching pilots for round one, even though some pilots we've seen before. So the Alias pilot, Alan and I have not seen before. The Stargate pilot we have seen before. We've talked about it on our Patreon. We'll talk about that more in a bit. But let's talk about Alias first. So this is Season 1, Episode 1, Truth Be Told, written and directed by J.J. Abrams. It aired on September 30th, 2001. Alan, what happened in Truth Be Told?
In the Alias pilot, Sydney Bristow discovers that her job as an agent for SD6, a top secret division of the CIA, is not what she thought it was. Sydney's father, Jack, also tells her the truth about his work, and she, enraged, seeks help from the real CIA and is hired as their double agent under the command of Agent Vaughn. From now on, her job is really simple. She needs to complete her cases at SD6 while reporting her findings back to the CIA. And in terms of the pilot, some other things happen. She risks it all and tells her fiance that she works for SD6 and thinks this is probably fine. I don't think he's going to blab, before his phone is traced and he calls her in a drunken haze, telling her that he's okay with her being an agent, and he is brutally murdered for this. And so she has nothing left to lose, and we see her in a sort of framing device go on a mission to extract some information from some like Chinese villains, I guess that's what their deal is. And she, gets into a big fight. And whereas disguise is also known as aliases.
Oh, nice. So we're going to talk about this episode on its merits first, the way that we normally would talk about an episode. We'll do the same for Stargate, and then we'll get into the conversation about comparing the two and seeing which one we want to continue with. But this is our first time watching Alias. It's a show that, for me, I've been aware of for a while. I think it's in that orbit of late 90s, early aughts. Female protagonist is kicking people in the face, and she's really cool. And this is like the spy version of that. So that's been my understanding of it for a while. Have you also felt kind of similarly, like it's on your radar, but you didn't really know much about it?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this was the show that J.J. Abrams kickstarted right before Lost, which is one of my favorite shows. So I've been aware of Alias and how it helped him get his gig on Lost for a while. Even though on this he's more of a direct showrunner, and on Lost he just kind of like spun the wheels and let Lindelof and company take over. So there is actually a little bit of DNA there that I recognized and want to talk about. But also, yeah, this is just one of those shows you hear about for years and years. It launched the career of Jennifer Garner, who went on to be in one of my favorite movies, 13 Going on 30. Which we also commentaried for our Patreon. And, it's really cool just like seeing the origin, like the most famous role that a lot of these people creatively and actor-wise like were involved in this like little weird series.
So what were your first impressions of the show?
Style. There is so much noise and action going on in Alias. It is hitting you with a lot of details and background information really quickly. My initial like gut feeling was like, wow, there's so much music in this show, which is not something I've really thought about since like Sense8, or probably but when we watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like there is just always every other shot, here's some indie music, and like sometimes it can get kind of overpowering. Like they're using indie music with like vocals underneath characters talking in this, which is just a creative decision that I find really interesting, because on one hand, it makes it sound almost cacophonous at points that you're like, ugh, I can't focus. But at other times, it like does a really great job of guiding you emotionally. Like, here's how you should feel about this grad student being proposed to on the quad, and here's like why this like moment is supposed to be badass. We're playing Meredith Brooks talking about hating men. Like, this is great. You know how you're supposed to feel. So it guides you really elegantly with that, and I think the music does a great job. And visually and stylistically, it checked off all of the boxes for me. I think it's funny, though, watching this series, watching the pilot to this, and thinking about how many things we've watched that like are just this as well, like shamelessly. Whether it's my partner got involved and now they have to die, woman who is a secret agent, lots of wigs, gratuitous leg shots. And my last thing is just like, it's not as gross about those things as a lot of other shows that we've watched. Like, I think Dollhouse owes a lot to this series, obviously. Aliases, personalities that are being exchanged. But this show doesn't have like a core element of raw sexist commentary at its center the way that Dollhouse does. So I liked it. That's all to say. I got quite a kick out of it, the Alias pilot. But what about you?
Yeah, I'm really happy that we watched it and that I could kind of understand the show a little bit better. It was like, I don't know, tonally not exactly what I expected, but then I don't really know what it was that I expected. Because it's like a pretty serious show.
Yeah.
Which, you know, is not necessarily a knock or a celebration of it. It's just kind of a fact that it's pretty grounded for what it is, which is a larger than life spy story.
Mm-hmm.
And it gets fairly dark. I think the summary gave away one of the bigger moments of darkness in the pilot. Oh no, it didn't.
I gave it away.
The summary didn't give, you gave it away. But yeah, there's like some, it like uses blood and pretty lightly, but in a very targeted way, to be upsetting. There's upsetting occurrences that happen. There's like some genuine suspense and kind of terror moments of, you know, Jennifer Garner's character being tortured in this episode. So it's like heavier than I thought it would be. It's really sleek and stylish and cool. And clearly it's like riding the wave of, you know, like Pierce Brosnan era Bond. Is that fair to say?
Your Bonds, your Mission Impossibles, like all of that stuff.
Sure.
Bourne,
Yeah.
Bourne's going to come out like a couple years later, you know?
Yeah. There definitely, I think, is a kind of boom and revival of like the cool spy action genre in the late 90s to the early 2000s, that this is a part of. And what's interesting to me is I think really the only spy TV show that I've seriously watched is Chuck. Mm-hmm. And Chuck is like a deconstruction of this stuff.
Exactly.
So it was kind of trippy to watch a show that is like not deconstructed. It just is this genre. Mm-hmm. And it's doing it pretty well. And it also feels, I think, for a lot of the pilot, like a movie, like a kind of mid-budget or indie spy movie, that if it had been 30 minutes longer, that's what it would have been. And it kind of like has the pacing of a movie that just you have the last 30 minutes lopped off. So that was kind of a funny experience too, of saying, well, you know, where does this go, or what happens next? Or I could have just watched this if you had kind of concluded the story, but instead now it's a show. So I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. So again, it's not exactly what I expected it to be, because I guess it just didn't feel very TV in that way of, it wasn't detached from itself. You know, it didn't look corny. It looked movie quality. It took itself and took things very seriously. So I guess that means it's good.
Well, this is you make a great point that like this looked and felt like a movie. And I did a little bit of research. I think I'm going to allow myself a little bit of research in this version of our podcast, because like when we do pilot chats, it's like, okay, I want to know if the show is good, but I want to judge it on the merits of just the pilot. But I am attempting, we are attempting a little bit in season 16 to like think about what watching this show is going to be like. Not just, is this pilot good, but is this show going to be good for us? And in doing that, I learned that Alias has a kind of a weird arc with it. So it's, I believe it's 5 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. I can confirm that, but this like serious movie-like tone fades away after a little while, and the series gets a lot more campy, especially after, I'd say, seasons 3 and 4, from what people said, because like this much action, this much intensity, you can't really sustain for too long. Like you have to cool down heavily after something like this episode. And so like we'll talk about this again when we're debating the matchup, but I watched this and I was like, yeah, I know that there's now a whole mystery and like what is working for the CIA versus SD6 going to mean for Sydney, but like I could watch any other spy thing and get my satisfaction. This is just a good one of those. I don't see myself being like, yeah, sit down and like watch some Alias. Like I could just watch anything else. It doesn't feel like it's carving out a niche in that space of like spy fiction beyond being
Right.
sleek and aughts as hell.
Well, and I think what's really interesting in that regard about its position here is like it is cut from the cloth of a James Bond type thing, because there's even a Q sort of character in it,
Yes,
who's like,
big
well,
time.
here's your gadgets, and they're doing that kind of a story of like there's gadgets and there's these international bad guys, and we're doing that sort of stuff. And it feels like it's saying, well, we're going to do a James Bond-y kind of story, but it's going to be more grounded, more serious, more about a person who has like a home and a life to lose and to risk. And it's coming out kind of on the crest of, because it comes out here in September of 2001, and it's clearly, obviously,
by the way,
right, conceived and created prior to 9/11. Post 9/11, there are tons of media and shows that deal with shades of what the show is addressing. Like there's terror, there's like conspiracy in the CIA or the FBI or whatever. You think about a show like 24, for example,
yes,
or a movie series like the Bourne series or whatever, where after this point, after Alias, there's a whole slew of things that are like ultra grounded, hyper realistic. Like there's no cutesy gadgets. There's none of that. It's just like we are bare knuckle boxing these bad guys and blowing shit up, and everything is like tense and scary. And so it kind of feels like Alias is doing a thing here that becomes irrelevant because spy media, if you can fit those things into spy media, swings so wildly away from the James Bondy type stuff that for Alias to say, we're doing like a grounded Bond thing. Like, of course, in contrast with those things, eventually Alias is going to be like, I guess we are kind of campy compared to where everybody else went around us in the landscape of TV and movies. So it's an interesting relic of like the year 2001 right before 9/11 happens. And then the show is going to have to kind of reckon with that and do something about that.
Right. Like we need to get campier because people are like, seeing all of this serious stuff in the news, and we need to dial it back. Can I tell you a narrative device that they employ in the later seasons? That'll explain what I mean by campier.
Yeah.
So like, in this episode, the thing that she's getting is this device, right? It's called the Mueller device, I believe. And it's this like special thing that we don't fully understand what it does, but we know that she might have broken it at one point. The back half of Alias that's actually a like ancient item, and the back half of Alias is her collecting all the different ancient items that are created in like ancient Italy in the 1500s. So it becomes, instead of like, I gotta communicate to the CIA what SD6 is doing, it's like there's a new item and we gotta go find it, and like let's go on an adventure to find it. That's what it ends. It kind of ends up being sort of like the Da Vinci Code.
Oh, Da Vinci Code, sure.
Or Uncharted, yes. And not so much like going into the jungle, but just like we're breaking into a museum to steal the next device, and we got this blah blah blah.
Gotcha.
So that's what I mean by like it gets very like, that's goofy and almost like Tomb Raider-y too.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about that pivot, although I know a lot of people who say that's also when the show starts to dip in quality.
Got it. Okay.
Some other things from the pilot that I really liked. We're definitely going to be comparing ensembles in both of these shows. I can't shout out enough the performance of Victor Garber as her dad in this. Just like weirdly good. I've always enjoyed Victor Garber in things ever since he's in Titanic. He just has one of those faces. Yeah, he plays a fantastic dad. Sometimes shitty, sometimes not. He's got an awesome voice, and I don't know. I liked the relationship between him and Sydney in this, the burgeoning, and that scene where her fiance calls him to ask for her hand in marriage.
That scene was like, so good.
I love it, especially knowing what we now know about him and like what his relationship to his daughter is. And he's basically like, you don't call me just so that you can tell your friends you called her dad first. I'm not going to give you permission to marry my daughter. She's going to give you permission to marry her. Like, feminism 201 has arrived, basically. It's quite fun. A fresh-faced Bradley Cooper makes a regular appearance in this show. I felt so weird about that. Like, thinking about the legacy of these different actors.
So help me understand his... Okay, so our main character, Sydney Bristow, Jennifer Garner's character, is leading this double life where she is a graduate student, it seems like. Yep. And she is a secret operative for who she thought was the CIA, but it turns out is this splinter organization called SD6.
Correct.
Bradley Cooper is like a friend of hers. Is that what's happening there?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. Because his character seemed kind of like thrown in and a little loose in this pilot.
His character didn't make sense until Danny dies. And then it was like, oh, now she has a love interest that's like a will they, won't they, you know? Because he doesn't know. He doesn't know right now, at least, about SD6 or the CIA or anything. He's just her really good friend.
I see. Okay. Because there's a scene where they're like jogging together and he's like upset that she's getting married or whatever. And you're like, okay, he has feelings for her. Got it. So I guess what they're going to do is, like you're saying, they're going to have a will they, won't they thing. And then she's going to have to decide a second time, like, do I tell him or do I not tell him to keep him safe? I've made this mistake once before. Am I going to make this mistake again, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense.
And just, I guess, knowing Bradley Cooper these days, it's like, you're not the, like, dorky friend. That's Bradley Cooper. Like, it doesn't work for me.
I know, especially when there's the moment where he fully takes his shirt off and he is, like, ripped. Oh, man, why don't you like me?
I'm really happy that you're getting married. I'm wearing glasses sometimes. It's okay.
I'm a journalist. It's like,
Stop.
all right. That's what he was, right? It seemed like he was a journalist.
I believe so. Yeah. Or worked for a newspaper. Yeah. What other like things that you want to shout out from this pilot?
Well, we can keep talking about the ensemble. Is there any other characters that stuck out to you?
I actually really did like Danny, her fiance.
Me too.
I was like, you succeeded. I fell for it. All you did was swap the genders, and I didn't immediately go dead wife alert, because you swapped them, and I was like, I guess they're gonna be together. And then I wrote in my notes, like, I guess what's unique about Alias is she's the one person in these shows who gets to tell her husband, and there's no repercussions. I'm incredibly foolish. So I was owned by that, but I liked him. Like when he serenades her on the quad extra loud, so everyone hears her.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I like you, and then he's gone, and it's sad.
Yeah, that's so. It got me too, but here's what happened to me. So I was like, okay, this guy is doomed to death. He has to die if he's proposing to her. And then I was like, oh, well, it seems like that scene where he's like calling and he's maybe going to give up the ghost. I was writing in my notes like, okay, it seems like, maybe this is a show where she's going to have to figure out, how do I balance this double life? Like, how do I do my spy stuff and have a husband or whatever?
Yeah.
And I looked at the IMDb cast just to see, okay, does this guy live?
Oh.
And I accidentally thought the guy who played, like from the little thumbnail, I thought the guy who plays the Q character was him. Mm-hmm. And it said like, oh, he's in all the episodes. And I was like, okay, cool. So they are doing this. He's going to live and they're going to figure out what to do with him. And then they killed him. And I was like, what?
Wait.
But I tried to protect myself from this moment emotionally. And now he's dead? What the heck? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? And it was also just like more of a grim, dark move than what I thought they were going to do,
Yeah.
Because
dead in the bathtub with the blood and everything. You're like,
yeah. Oh my goodness. And like her dad killed him, I guess.
I think so.
It seems like.
Or he okayed it. Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. So that really upset me because, yeah, he was charming. And I also thought there was going to be a moment where maybe she was going to like call it off or something. But anyway, so that was sad that he died.
I think they did tee it up just because when she talks to Kenny, her coworker, who's older and is married, she was like, "Hey, does your wife know?" And he's like, "Absolutely not. She thinks I'm an accountant or whatever." And she's like, "Is that ever hard?" And he's like, "No, because like I want to protect her, and that's the rule, is you protect people." But she's asking him this after she's already told Danny.
Right.
And so you're like, haha, that would suck, wouldn't it? And that should have been enough dramatic foreshadowing to know. But I still fell for it and was like, yikes, sad.
I did like that coworker guy, by the way, who is the voice of Martian Manhunter, Carl Lumley.
No kidding.
I heard his voice. I was like, is that Martian Manhunter? And it is.
Huh.
I thought he was great. I don't think I've seen him in live action stuff before, but he's pretty good.
Well, I think, no, you're thinking there's two different people. Carl Lumley, Marcus Dixon, that's the guy who lives. That's the guy who's like continues to be in the show. And then I think it's Kenny is the one who dies, like another coworker. I could be wrong, actually. No, I think I'm wrong. Carl makes it, and he is the voice of Martian Manhunter.
Yeah, her partner guy is the Martian Manhunter guy.
Love to see it.
Yeah. And then I really enjoyed the Q guy. I don't know his character name or actor name. But
Marshall Flinkman is the character. Great name.
What's the actor's name?
Kevin Wiseman.
I thought he did a great job. I think the funny thing is that like his character is from the tone of show that I was expecting to see, and the whole show around him is like not the same tone.
Yeah,
so he's up there like, this little gadget is whatever, and so it does like, and I'm laughing my ass off, and every other character is just waiting for him to be a little more grounded.
Yeah, but it turns out the show's going to catch up to him, not him catching up to the show.
Yeah,
totally
but yeah, I enjoyed him.
Also, how weird is it that the show is just on Disney Plus? Like, this doesn't feel like a thing that you would.
Why is it on Disney Plus? What did it air on that Disney has it?
Probably ABC, I would guess. I'm correct. ABC.
Was there a recent streaming merger that put ABC stuff on Disney Plus?
Oh, Disney Plus. I think there was, but also isn't ABC owned by Disney? Yeah, ABC family friendly shows coming to Disney Plus. ABC owned by Disney. Google search says ABC owned television is a division of Disney Entertainment. Yeah, they own it.
Weird. Okay.
The House of Mouse expands once again.
I feel like that kind of dilutes the Disney Plus brand. Because it felt like... go ahead.
Sorry, I love this brand meeting. I'm in my marketing MBA.
Sorry.
No, I want this. I love this. You're right. It does dilute the brand.
I think what was so interesting and appealing to me about Disney Plus as a streaming service is that they only had their stuff, and they were the only place that had it, right? So it's like, look, if you want Disney, Marvel, Pixar, Star Wars, there's only one place to go. It's Disney Plus, and that's all we got. And I was kind of like, you know what?
I respect it.
That's honestly worth the monthly subscription for me and my family to pay to have that. Sure, fine. But when you said that Alias was on Disney Plus, I was like, what the heck? Should I cancel my Disney Plus?
Well, they're going to be hoovering up more stuff. A lot of Hulu's library is going to be on Disney Plus soon. They're trying to
wacky stuff.
Well, welcome to the age of streaming television, where everything they're consolidating streaming services. This is not a good thing.
We're entering the monopoly era.
Yes, and there's no Daddy Warbucks. There's 15 of them. There's no one. Anyways, final thoughts about Alias before we move on.
Let me skim my little notes. I like the spy theme song. Very classic spy theme song.
Good font.
Her boyfriend, or she asked her boyfriend at the beginning if he got the Dave Matthews tickets.
Amazing.
She gets on an elevator and somebody tries to get on behind her, and the elevator guy says, "Sorry, executive elevator." The guy says, "Come on, man, drop me off at 12." And the elevator guy flashes a gun, and the guy goes, "All right, damn."
Okay, yeah.
That's pretty funny.
How weird was everything with
sexy.
her? How weird was everything with her fiance? Yeah, where he's like kissing on her stomach, and he says, and I quote, "One day there's going to be a baby in there," which is such a weird thing to say to your feet. I get it. And now knowing that he's extremely doomed, it's like, cute. Yes.
Yeah.
But like, it just felt weird. No, I've never ever known somebody to say one day there's going to be a baby in there while like kissing on their partner's stomach. It just feels kind of weird. And he like repeatedly,
I think that's
he's like, I love kids. I want you to know, like, I want kids and I love to have them.
Right. Yeah. I think that's one of those things where like in real life, someone probably could say that and 50-50 their partner would be like, what the heck? Or like, aw. But in a TV show, it does not read or make sense.
Also, when she's like, get up, undress, and then they shower together, and you're like, are they gonna have shower sex? And she's like, I'm in the CIA.
Pretty funny.
Really funny. Yeah. That's all I have.
Yeah. The asynchronous plot stuff was a little hard to follow at first, but it makes sense by the end of the episode. I like the subtle touch of like chronologically she meets somebody at the funeral who has the red wig before she has the red, or has red hair before she puts on the red wig.
Yes.
So that was kind of like
Bradley Cooper's sister, right?
Bradley Cooper's sister, yes. So that was kind of a funny like marker, chronological marker. It's like, she hasn't gotten red hair yet, but that person has red hair. Interesting. All right, I think I'm putting all the pieces together. Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, I think that's Alias. I'm really glad that we watched it. I'm wondering if we had piloted it, what our take on it would have been, like before we put it into the matchup. And I think my general vibe is like, yeah, I'm glad we watched that. I think I would watch like a couple episodes of Alias on an afternoon. You know, I'm not like rushing to watch more right this second necessarily. But it's clearly an interesting show that has some runway. So
yes.
I'm excited to talk about it a little bit more after we talk about Stargate, of course.
Yes, indeed. Next up, we're talking the pilot to Stargate SG-1. Called Children of the Gods. These were written by Jonathan Glassner and Brad Wright, and they were directed by Mario Azzopardi, and they aired July 27th, 1997. So Magellan, what happened in the Stargate SG-1 pilot?
In this episode, following the events of the 1994 Roland Emmerich film Stargate, Colonel Jack O'Neill is brought out of retirement to lead a new expedition back to Abydos, only to find an old friend, a new enemy, and a far wider use of the Stargate.
Yeah. Okay, guys, you got some Farscape in my Star Trek. You got your Star Trek in my Farscape. This show lies at a fascinating intersection of a lot of things that we like here at Chats, right? It is deeply invested in technology and how science can create opportunities for us to advance as a society. It is very earnest and cares about its premise very much. And I still have my qualms about it, but rewatching this pilot and like paying a little bit more attention to it, as opposed to our pilot chats where I was kind of like, here's my overview. I definitely found a lot more to enjoy this time on the SG-1 rewatch. What about you?
So to fully cite this for folks who want to hear our initial impressions, you can go check out Pilot Chats 46. Which came out in February of last year. And I'd forgotten, but we did that pilot chats with Pat of the Brothers Infinite War. I re-listened to some of the discussion. It's a pretty fun one, so check out.
A bonus discussion at the end with a friend of the podcast, McKinley, as well.
That's right, because you watched this with McKinley.
Correct.
When you watched it the first time. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So our opinions on the Stargate pilot are pretty well documented. This is the third time that I've watched it at this point, because I initially watched it in I think 2021 when it was like around when my stepdad passed away, and this is a show that he watched.
Mm-hmm.
He watched Stargate a lot, and he was, I think I said this on the pilot chats, but he was in the Air Force. So this is like and he loved like Star Trek and shit like that. So this show is like a very my stepdad kind of show to me.
Right.
So I like watched the movie and I watched the pilot and I was like, yeah, I'm going to watch Stargate. And then I just didn't. And then almost a year later, we did the pilot chats, and now we're in 2023. So this is the third year in a row that I've watched the pilot of Stargate SG-1. So like it didn't have quite the same new show smell because I've seen it a bunch of times. But it had this cozy feeling of like, oh yeah, right. Jack O'Neill and Daniel Jackson and oh yeah, Abydos and the dudes with the cobra heads and Teal'c is here and that's cool. And oh yeah, Don S. Davis, awesome. So like it had a lot of that sort of thing where it felt like coming home a little bit to a show that I've really only seen one episode of. I don't know that I was like jazzed by it because I've now seen it a couple times.
Of course, yes. And like for me, I remember one of my biggest issues with it on the first watch was I had not and still have not watched the Stargate movie. If we were to cover this, we would obviously start by watching that. It's canon; it matters to the plot of this. Yeah. However, like when I watched this pilot the first time, I knew nothing about the Stargate movie, and I was like, okay, they're referencing it and in ways that I don't really care about, and I can tell that this would hit emotionally. And so I split the difference, and what I did this time was I read a detailed summary of the movie. It took me like 20 minutes to read this whole thing. It was like a scene by scene. And I was like, okay, I have like the events of the movie in my head, and I'm like putting together the emotional beats and how they work. And so when like the kid on the other side of the Stargate sees Jack O'Neill, and you realize that like Jack lost his son like tragically dies before the events of the film. And so now this kid is like his substitute son. You're like, oh, that's actually beautiful. That's like such a nice moment, especially if you just came out of the movies and like you got home. And however, I don't know how much of a time difference there is. Probably I think 3 years. You're like, oh God, I remember that wholesome kid, Skara. Oh my God, he's in the show. That's so good. Like it makes you emotional in the ways that this is supposed to. And like I think that the rest of the ensemble is surprisingly good. I definitely commented on that, how much I enjoyed the main four in our pilot chats. But like really, I could see Jack, Daniel, Carter, and Teal'c could just like go on stupid adventures and yell at each other, and that would be a good show for me, a very cozy show. I think there are like my biggest qualms though with Stargate SG-1 are like how military obsessed especially this is, and I know that that's like a thing that continues throughout the series because they work for the Air Force. You said, right?
Yeah, it's my understanding that not only are the characters like working for the government, but that Stargate was like as a show was like closely associated with the Air Force or the military, and like got some funding from them, which I don't love. Yeah,
it just feels weird because we watch other shows like this, and it's like, oh, what's his name? Ben Browder's character in Farscape's name is John Crichton. Crichton like works for like NASA, and you're like, okay, but it's not a show about NASA. Whereas like this feels like it is about the U.S. military and like this obsession with like how many scenes are there of people stepping through Stargates and people pointing guns at them and then people having to go, no, they're the good guys. Like it feels like the show is aware of how like kind of imperialist the concept of like Stargate hopping is. Like we get to go wherever we want as long as we get a path back, and we'll get whatever we want out of those places, and then we get to return, and they don't get to return to us. We set up one-way gates everywhere. So I'm just like keying into that and thinking about that, especially like you hire Don S. Davis. I'm going to be thinking about the military. He's wearing the suit. He feels like he's, Major Briggs, like it's happening.
Yeah, right. And it's different, from like a Star Trek, where I think we have similar misgivings about the kind of like military quality. But at least in Star Trek, they're trying to make this distinction of like Starfleet is an expeditionary organization that is trying to like be peacemaking and diplomatic, and isn't explicitly like militaristic. They are imperialist of a different stripe, and those criticisms of Star Trek are there. And also, as Next Generation goes on, it becomes more aware of those critiques. And especially as you get into like Deep Space Nine, it becomes more aware of those critiques and participates in those critiques as well. Whereas SG-1, I mean, not only is it imperialistic to do that, but like textually, the Stargates, as far as I'm aware, were built and placed by like an alien empire, right? And so like American military people have this little conversation where it's like, oh, we have these Stargates. There's this funny moment where Adonis Davis is like, well, it turns out the president happens to agree with you, and we're going to do these Stargates. And that's the president saying like, hey, sir, it turns out that there's these like shortcuts placed around space by this alien empire. Should we like go through them and like pillage all these different civilizations, or like, you know, introduce ourselves to them or get stuff from them? And the president of the US is like, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's what we do on Earth. Like, let's go. Let's do it.
Expand the range. Why not, baby?
So yeah, it's a super imperialistic show. I'm curious to see. You know, I think the downside of watching pilots, which we predicted, is we don't have a window yet into what the week-to-week kind of average episode of this show looks like.
Correct.
But I'm curious to see what that is. But yeah, totally agreed on that critique.
It's something we always have to run into when watching TV at all. It's like, well, what is this show doing politically, whether it intends to or not? Like, what's happening politically in this show and undertones of it? Because this week on Chat Season 16, do we support the CIA or the American military? Like, like which glorification show is like more fun for us, you know? And I think those are like interesting challenges to have, and it doesn't mean that we just say like, oh, the answer is none of these. We only watch shows that are morally pure and not about imperialism. It's like, well, then you don't watch anything, sadly. You don't watch a lot of the like most important shows of our time, at least.
Right.
So super valid critique. I just think that like it's really baked into what Stargate is about on a week-to-week basis. And like it's all quote unquote off ship episodes, at least to my understanding, or primarily it's that. We go somewhere, we fall through a thing, there's people there, they have a problem, we either fix it or we figure out how to leave. That's it.
Right.
But I think I just enjoy this cast a lot. Like I can't get over the fact that these Air Force members are like pretty fun and lovable. It's that simple. And Teal'c's arc in this pilot is fan-fucking-tastic. What can I say? Christopher Judge is amazing. We love him so much. The voice of Kratos in God of War is this like member of the evil species that was like bred with this monster inside of his stomach, but he learned to control it because it gives him infinite life. And he sees the horrible things that his group are doing and says like, I gotta get out. This is my one chance to get out. And he just leaves. And he says, well, I'm an outcast now, but that's okay. And like, you can't tell me that in 200 episodes of Stargate SG-1, Teal'c is not at one point going to go, Beans, you guys are doing the same thing, aren't you? No. What side did I jump over to?
Yeah.
And like, that's something I'm really looking forward to watching unfold.
Yeah.
I guess what are some other like things in the pilot maybe that you noticed this time that you liked, or just things you wanted to dig into?
Yeah, I love Teal'c, and I'm excited to see where he goes. I love Amanda Tapping's character, Samantha Carter.
Yeah.
She's really fun. And you know, you were talking about the movie earlier, and the last time that we discussed this pilot, when we did it for the Patreon, the movie was fresher in my mind because it had only been a year since I'd seen it. So I was still kind of comparing Richard Dean Anderson to Kurt Russell, Michael Shanks to James Spader, and I like had a stronger memory and association with the way the characters worked in the movie. But to be honest with you, like that didn't really stick with me. And I was really enjoying Jack and Daniel in the TV version this time around.
Yes.
Because I think what Richard Dean Anderson and Michael Shanks do well is they take those like very heightened movie portrayals and they soften them and kind of add a thin layer of irony in order to make them digestible TV characters who you could watch on a week-to-week basis. So it was just fun to hang out with these guys again and see them on the TV. And see their interactions with each other. So I was really jazzed about the ensemble this time around. Yeah.
They're just fun. They're loud and they have big personalities. Jackson being a wife guy and being like, of course I stayed behind. I have a wife here.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, that's so weird, but okay, we're happy for you. And he like leaves her again. And then part of his motivation is like, am I ever going to see her again? Did I make the right choice?
Mm-hmm.
Like, even the characters who were part of the SG-1 group before are being confronted with like, oh, do I actually want to stay or should I have left? Because at any point in this series, they could just not come back, right? They could choose not to come back.
Right.
Sorry, Stargate didn't work and we all stayed here. If they found like a utopian society. And I like that. And I like that the government's kind of trusting them with that too. But it still has this sort of hold on them. So love that aspect. Love Samantha Carter's, again, speaking of feminism, like, I'm captain, not doctor. And then later on when she meets the other guy, she's like, I'm doctor, whatever. I thought was very funny. Her like bristling at Jack's attempt to riz her up is very charming.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the shot that got me the most excited for watching more of the show is when they emerge from what is the third Stargate that we've ever seen, because we've seen the one on Earth, we've seen the one on Abydos, and then they go to this other planet that has like the castle and whatever the heck is going on there. And they emerge from this
slavery world.
Right. They emerge from this Stargate that's sitting on like a hilltop and has these like ceremonial stones placed around it. And there's this wide shot of the Stargate in a totally unusual situation where we haven't seen a Stargate before. And the show holds on this shot as if to say, like, look, we can now put these anywhere. I don't know if you understood that because we kind of talked about it in Science Talk earlier, but like, it's not just the Egypt stuff. This show can go any kind of place we want now.
Right.
Look at it. And that got me really excited because that opens up really infinite possibilities for what Stargate could be about. And this idea of like, well, the computer's running in the background. It's going to spit out a couple coordinates every month. You're like, okay, good. That sounds like a TV show to me.
Yeah.
I like that idea of like, we're going to kind of jump in to whatever coordinates the computer spat out this week. And then we're going to see what's on the other side. You do not know what it's going to be, but it's going to be weird. And then we're going to jump back. So that got me
do it all again next week.
That got me really interested in watching at least a couple more episodes. But other than that, I think I've just seen this a couple times, so there wasn't much that jumped out at me here. I will say I think we watched a slightly different cut of the pilot this time because
what was added or removed?
So when we talked to Pat, there were two things that he discussed. I'd have to compare. So one of them was the nudity thing. There was no nudity in this version. We watched it on Prime Video this time around. We had watched it on Netflix last year, I think.
I think so, yeah.
So that to me indicates that this is not the original version. This is the edited version. The other thing that I think is more interesting that Pat was talking about on the pilot chats is that Teal'c's voice or his affect changes as the show goes on. And in the edited version of the pilot, they had him go back and redub his lines with like his new affect or accent or whatever it is. So in the unedited version, it's like his original delivery of the lines. But in the edited version, it's like...
It reflects how he talks later in the show.
That's correct. So we may have gotten that here because it did feel like his lines were dubbed. So as far as I could tell, those were the only major differences.
Definitely something to consider right? Like watching the show. I mean, this is I wanted to like talk about that and also dig into something you just said a few minutes ago, like this idea of what's appealing about Stargate, and maybe the reason why it's gone now for 20 plus years is that we can go anywhere. We can start where we always are, and we can go anywhere we want. We have an Atlantis show. We have a one that crosses the whole universe. We have one in the continuum. Like we have so many. We have prequels and sequels and sidequels and everything, because that simple premise gives you a huge runway. I've been watching TNG season 6 because we're going to be doing ChatzKidz season 6 soon, and what's fascinating about watching the back end of TNG is you start to realize like how they're starting to run out of runway. Like there's only so many types of weird alien planets that like specifically the crew of the Enterprise in its current configuration will run into before you're like, okay, this sort of feels like something I've seen before, if that makes sense. Like we're getting another Moriarty episode, or we're getting another Q episode. Like we just kind of found our building blocks.
Yeah.
And like Stargate has just inherently more building blocks because we can literally go anywhere we want.
Mm-hmm.
Not just like within the confines of space and planets in space, but like you want to be in an underground society. And also the Stargate, like the gate itself, has different reverence depending on where we go.
Yeah.
Like some places it's just like a rock on the beach. Some places it's the middle of a temple because people built a temple around it. And I think that's freaking fascinating. It's like, how does every different dimension view the Stargate? Is it cool to all of them? Is it hidden in a military base like it is in ours, or what?
Yeah, I love that too. That was another thing that I liked about that shot, is it showing like this is a society that has a reverence for the Stargate in some way, but it's like a different looking reverence than what's happening on Abydos or, on Earth. Because also the other thing that's fascinating and promising about Earth is Earth's Stargate was the most relevant during the time of ancient Egypt. And then for quite a long time, it was buried underground.
You just sat around in underground, yeah.
So there are probably planets where, the Stargate has fallen into disrepair or is now hidden or whatever. And like you were saying about the underground societies thing, another limitation that we don't think about a lot with space shows is that to get to a planet, you need to land on it, right? And that kind of raises logistical questions about how are we getting onto it, and are we seen, or I don't know, whatever. They're just like kind of things that you assume need to be part of the logic of that. But with Stargate, it's like, no, we step in, we pop out on the other side, and the other side could be anywhere. It could be within any kind of structure, anywhere on the planet. There could be any sort of weather or whatever happening around it, because we just need an opening to walk out of on the other side. So that logistically is just like really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's why I think it had such legs for a while, is we could keep putting more things on the other end.
Yeah. I verified what's different about the two versions, by the way.
Oh, great.
So
great.
The 2009, this is a 2009 re-edit that was released on DVD. Wow. So some of the scenes were trimmed to make it more efficient. I'm getting this from IMDb, by the way. Some of the violence was toned down. The full frontal nudity was removed. The visual effects were enhanced. And then one of the other big changes is the original pilot had reused the score from the 1994 film. But this pilot re-edit actually has the composer of the show, I believe, rescore the pilot. Joel Goldsmith.
Didn't have any strong feelings. Yes, Joel Goldsmith. Yes. I didn't have strong feelings about the music in this, but that's interesting that they wrote new music.
I liked it. I took active note of the fact that I was enjoying the music.
There you go.
So
more unique, at least.
There's something. So this version overall was 7 minutes shorter than the original cut.
Oh.
Which it still felt too long. 90-minute pilots. Come on now. Also, Alias trying to do a 67-minute pilot. What are you doing? Come on now. Stop it.
Alias felt kind of cramped in that 67 minutes. Because, I mean, like, I don't know, kind of. It did do a whole mission.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the Alias pilot lengthwise definitely works better. But the Stargate pilot is very much two parts. And I liked the first part a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
Like the second half has the action, it has Teal'c, it has all that, but the first part is like way more mystery and question marks and callbacks and stuff that I liked.
Yeah.
I digress.
Yeah.
I think. Do you have any other notes before we take a break?
The only other thing is going back to the president thing I was talking about before.
Yeah.
I was really amused by that line of like, the president happens to agree with you. Because I like to imagine that, like, you know, it's a president who has no idea about the Stargate stuff at all. And is dealing with like fucking, you know, war and, you know, poverty and all this other shit and the economy and politics. And then somebody's like, okay, by the way, just a quick thing. Like, deep underground in a bunker, there's a Stargate, and we just want to know if we can go through it. And the president's like, I don't know.
Sure.
Yes. I can't even process all of this stuff right now.
Yeah, I wonder how often the president, even today, has to accept information that's like, well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Anyways.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, very, very good note, though. That's all I have. I want to discuss whether or not which show of these actually makes it to the next round.
Amazing piece of trivia.
Yes.
So there's a moment where Samantha Carter says about the controller for the Stargate. This is how they controlled it. It took us 15 years and 3 supercomputers to MacGyver a system for the gate on Earth. Richard Dean Anderson
played
MacGyver. According to one account, Tapping ad-libbed the MacGyver reference while reading for the part of Carter, and that was what clinched the role for her.
Ooh,
that's kind of fun piece of trivia.
It's a good line to ad-lib.
Yeah,
I love that. Didn't you also say that you did that like open source psychometrics quiz, like which fictional character are you?
Yeah, and Daniel Jackson was one of my highest. I got like a 77% match with Daniel Jackson.
Amazing. You do be simping.
I do. I am a wife guy and I wear glasses, and I do need tissues right now because I'm sick.
Fantastic. Well, let's go get you some tissues, and we'll be right back after this musical break to decide who moves on in round 1 of season 16. Hey, welcome back to Chats Season 16. I'm still Alan, and he is still Magellan. Hi, man. Welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Did you enjoy the break?
I did. It was nice.
We sang a song. I went to the bathroom. I opened my heart to you. And we did that all in the span of about 5 minutes. So, hey, guys. We're here to make a decision in the second half. No more episodes to discuss. We watched what we watched this week. And now it's time to dig into our criteria. So, both of us brought sort of rough criteria for what helps us make this decision. And mine are generally just, what is your gut check? What is a show that you sight unseen are like, yep, I would prefer to watch this one more. Which one of these shows do you know more about? As in, like, there will be fewer surprises for you, because a big fun thing in Chats is that we're a first-time watch podcast, so we like to be surprised when we can be. And the big third one was, what's cozier? What can you see yourself settling down to watch week to week and going, today I'm going to watch 2 episodes of blank, and that's going to make me feel happy and fit into my life well. I think that those are the big tent poles for me. So starting things off, Magellan, gut check. Alias versus Stargate SG-1. Which show wins and why, to your opinion?
It's really hard for me. I'm doing the best that I can to separate this decision from, because really what we're deciding is like, which show do we want to watch episode 2 of, right?
Yes.
Because like the SG-1 thing, I couldn't help but calculate how many episodes it is, how long it would take for us to cover that show. And I have to like let that consideration go. in this discussion, I think, because it's not really fair to Stargate, but like it would take us about 2.5 to 3 years to cover Stargate SG-1. And 2.5 years ago from now was when we were releasing the Studio 60 episodes. So like that's a lot of time.
That's a life.
But we've also explored other formats, and we could like take breaks in the middle, or run a short show in parallel with it or something. Like there's other things we can do to make it so that it doesn't feel like we're drowning in Stargate for 2 years or whatever. Mm-hmm. So if I set that aside,
which episode would you watch episode 2 of? Which show would you watch episode 2 of?
I think it's Stargate right now, because I think it's a show that I've wanted to watch for longer. When I first watched the Stargate pilot, I was very excited to watch episode 2 compared to watching the Alias pilot. I wasn't like, I want to watch episode 2 right now. I sort of felt like I got a complete experience from the Alias pilot, kind of.
Right.
So that's my gut. My gut says Stargate.
It's the ultimate problem with a movie like Pilot, is it's just too satisfying. Like Lost is kind of similar. Like you can watch that first one and be like, okay, there's some questions, but like I'm good. I get it.
Yeah.
And Elliot stuff into the feels like that. So that's 1 point for Stargate on gut check from Magellan.
Mm-hmm.
Having just watched them before we discussed them, I would tell you my pick is Alias.
Tell me more.
I love looking at Alias. I think it's a wonderful show to look at, and I would like to see those characters flesh out and build into a week-to-week show and see, because it's like, this is the kind of counter to what I was saying earlier. Stargate, I can understand what a week-to-week of it looks like. Alias, it's like, is there anything to this that's beyond just occasionally pushing forward the main plot, and then there's a case of the week? Is there anything else there? There's like almost a mystery. And that's why I'm kind of curious, like, what does Alias episode 2 look like at 45 minutes? So that's my gut check. What was my second criteria again? Oh, shows that you know about.
Yeah.
So when we watched SG-1 for Pilot Chats, I skimmed IMDb and like read some or Netflix or whatever, and like read some episode premises. And I was like, whoa, that's so interesting. We go to a slavery planet, we go to the dinosaur era, we go to modern day Earth, we go to like so many, they do like everything, and they all sound weird and goofy, and people wear funny outfits, and it's like ridiculous,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also got some heart. When I read about what goes on in Alias, I was like, the first 2.5 seasons of the show are like really dark and interesting and like well paced, well directed, well written, building the main plot. Season 3, season 4, we're still building that main plot, but like it's getting a little stupid. And then by the time we're in season 5, we're in like, someone like on Reddit said, if I told you, this is not a spoiler, they were like, if I told you that Sydney found out that she had superpowers in season 5, would you believe me? And this person who had only watched the pilot was like, no way, that's impossible. And he was like, well, I'm lying, but that's not too far off. Like, it gets that stupid. It's like, okay, that's really interesting.
That's exciting.
What do you know about these shows beyond these pilots?
Yeah, I know the Alias stuff, that it gets wacky and there's some kind of like ancient conspiracy or something, and how the heck does that work? And then Stargate, I don't know a ton about where it goes. I just know that we're like kind of chasing the bad aliens and also doing other episodes, and somehow this show spins off into multiple Stargate spinoffs. And somehow there's 10 seasons, and also in the later seasons we get some of our favorite actors from Farscape to join us. So what's even up with that? I couldn't tell you. Like, the thing that's sort of odd here is I know exactly what a week-to-week Stargate episode feels like. I have no clue what the 10-season arc of Stargate SG-1 is. Whereas with Alias, I don't know what a week-to-week Alias episode looks like, but I have a vague sense of what the 5-season arc of Alias is somewhat like, given this information. So it's kind of a tough comparison to make there, because it feels like the more chatsable show is the one where I don't know as much about the week to week, but I know that it goes somewhere, as opposed to Stargate, where it's like, for how long can we do samey episodes, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think what we've experienced in Trek chats is, at this point, maybe we're starting to feel like we wish that we had covered TNG week to week, because it's starting to get, like in the last few seasons, it's been a lot more discussable. But there have definitely been stretches of TNG where I've been like, whew, I'm glad that I only have to talk about that episode for 3 minutes or whatever, because it's like, that was a whole lot of nothing. And I would imagine there's going to be a lot of that in Star Trek or in Stargate. So that's kind of what I know and don't know, is that contrast between the day to day and the arc.
Interesting. Yeah, in terms of the spin-offs from Stargate that I'm aware of are Atlantis, which takes place after season 7 of Stargate. It's a spin-off where we dig into the Atlantis universe and see what they have going on. We've got Stargate Universe, which I'm not super clear on. I think it's just a different thing, like different crew, different people. I could be wrong.
I think it's like the Voyager of Stargate. Is
right.
What it
These people are way
like.
far out.
Yeah.
Pretty cool idea. And then Stargate Infinity, which was the canceled, we can't come back to Earth until we clear our names show. And then they don't clear their names because the show got canceled really quickly. So I believe those are the main ones. SG-1, Atlantis, and Universe. Which is fine and good. Alias doesn't have any extemporaneous media that I'm aware of.
I'm not aware of any either.
In 2009, there were rumors of an Alias spin-off. Writing a new series about married spies for next season. Interesting. Oh, sure.
What?
Sure. Okay, this is relevant to us deciding this. Sydney has a new love interest at some point. And it's about like if they get married or when they get married. What is that like, being married spies? It's Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is the thing. This is why Alias loses points for me. Is it's just doing other shows. It's other movies and other shows. Which just in the context of TV.
Yeah, it's a very in genre spy thing. It feels like. Yes. I don't think it's going to do something that's like totally brand new.
So that's a bit of a minus for me. And then my last criteria, and I think we both have the same answer for this one, but like, which of these is a show that you would be like, I host a blank podcast for the next couple of months. And you tell your friends and family that, and every weekend we sit down and we go, I'm going to watch 2 episodes of this. Which show works on that level for you more?
Yeah, I mean, that's Stargate pretty comfortably. I think choosing, if we're zooming way out and thinking about becoming a Stargate podcast, that kind of returns us, I think, the closest to what maybe the initial promise of Chats was, or to like, what maybe a more typical TV podcast setup is, which is like, we are Gate Chats, whatever it is. And, we're always watching Stargate, and gosh, we watch so much Stargate that we end up talking about other things for a lot of the time. Oh my gosh. And like, hey, you don't have to be a big fan of Stargate to listen to the podcast. Just come tune on in. Like we can kind of, I think what would be interesting show-wise is, because Stargate is so cozy, and for the most part there are probably not these like titanic plot shifting episodes all that often. Right. I think what that would allow us to do is it would allow us to develop a kind of podcast vibe that's somewhat detached from the show itself, if that makes sense. Like, it's almost this paradoxical thing of like, once we have guaranteed with certainty that like the thing we were talking about for 2 years is Stargate, we can talk less about Stargate, kind of. I don't know if what I'm saying makes sense, but
it makes perfect sense. I'm sorry, I wanted to let you talk it out, but yes.
But like we could even have, half of the episode is like we're talking about Stargate, and then the other half is like, now we're just hanging out, and because like we don't need to talk about the episodes for an hour and a half if they don't warrant it, But it's like comfy to hang out with our pals, every week, because definitely doing Trek chats, watching Star Trek is super cozy. I love it. I love watching Star Trek. And I would imagine that watching Stargate is going to feel exactly the same. Whereas Alias, like, I think we would get into it. I think we would enjoy it. I think it would be similar to, well, that's also a pretty long show. I mean, I'm talking about Stargate as if it's like the longest thing in the world. But Alias is 5 seasons long. So it would be one of the longer series that we've covered. It's a total of 105 episodes. So I think it, would be somewhat similar to like a Babylon 5 situation in the sense that we would get really deep into it and invested in it and probably appeal to like this core of Alias fans. And that is its own kind of coziness, but also it doesn't read as well to people who like don't know the show, because I feel like not a lot of people are familiar with Alias.
Right. And also Alias is much more longer term stories. And so
it's more serialized. Right.
What's fun is if we did Stargate, we could like similar to Better Off when we covered Better Off Ted. It's like, hey, do you want to just come on and watch an episode of Stargate with us? You don't have to know anything. They go through some gates and they mess stuff up and then they come home. And we could just like we wouldn't need to like only have Stargate fans on to be guests, so we can like have more types of people on. And like you're saying, the conversation doesn't have to only be about Stargate, because I want a longer chat show again, not necessarily a 200 episode thing. I do think that's the longest one, but when it's that long, a couple of good things happen. Number one, the listener has time to find it, to settle in, to get committed to like, I'm finally gonna do it. Chats is covering Stargate. I've been meaning to watch it. I'm gonna do it now. They started it. That's how I felt like when A More Civilized Age said they're gonna do Clone Wars. That show is like a lot of episodes, and I was like, I'm never gonna watch this. And as soon as the podcast did it, I was like, okay. And now here I am at season 7 of Clone Wars, and I'm like, I did the damn thing over 2 years.
Right. Right.
So I think it creates that kind of engagement. It lets us do things like, remember when we did Farscape and I would buy the illustrated companions and like read the production of the season? Way more stuff you can dig into and crunch into when you have a long, like there is value to covering a long show, even though our short attention spans are like, I want to do something else. It's like, you just continue talking about Stargate, but recontextualize how and why you talk about it.
Yeah. Right.
And that's a plus to both of these shows because they're both long. But again, I think guest-wise, Stargate wins for being much more accessible. It's a show that like when I check on our YouTube TV account here at the house, I'll go like, oh, there's a season 6 episode of Stargate, and I'll watch 10 minutes of it and be like, yeah, I understand what's going on. I've done that, and it's like kind of fun. So I guess that also goes back to like, what do we know about the show? It's on cable a lot, and I've seen clips of it.
Yeah.
Also, we wouldn't have to watch Atlantis and Universe and all that. We could just do SG-1 and be done.
Right.
It becomes the Ben Browder, Claudia Back show after a certain point, and that's great. I'm happy for them.
Right.
But let's hit me with your criteria.
Yeah. So I came up with 16 criteria, and really the question is just like Alias or Stargate is the answer to each of these questions. So I've got kind of 4 categories with 4 things in each one. So 16 total in honor of season 16. First, I want to talk about meme schemes, screams, and themes. So, Alan, when we're talking about memes, these are moments overall. Which of these 2 shows had more memeable moments? More moments of ironic or semi-ironic silliness? What was the more memeable show?
Oh, I think that's Alias, actually. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I just think that like that silly aughts-ness makes for more memeable potential. The Stargate pilot is pretty serious. They're both serious.
What about the guys with the big cobra heads?
That's true. I mean, I'm flexy on this one. My gut is Alias, but if we can
give me one meme. Give me one meme.
I guess I can't. I guess that's a good point.
Alias memes.
Yeah, Alias memes. There we go. Sydney, I love you.
Okay, none of these are good.
They're all about the guy, about Q.
He's pretty memeable.
Yeah.
He's pretty memeable. I think this is Stargate. I think Stargate's much more memeable.
I'm going to give it up to you on that.
Now schemes. Okay, which one has more moments of intrigue and plot movement? I think that's Alias.
That's Alias with a gun. Number 1 with a gun.
That's Alias. Screams. Which had more moments of excitement or surprise? Or like, whoa.
Quantity of moments is Alias. Quality of moments is Stargate. Because that whole Teal rebellion scene where he's like, I've never trusted anyone, but you are the first person I believe can do this.
Oh, that scene still hits so hard.
It does.
Oh, that was fucking metal.
Give it to Stargate.
Oh, that was so good. I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay, and then themes. Which do you think had more moments where it felt like, okay, this is about something that we could dig into?
Oh, good point.
Because we didn't really talk about themes for either one all that much, really.
Yeah, like what's thematically going on.
And that's where we kind of make our money over the long term, is like having something to talk about that the show's about.
I think Alias takes this.
Takes that, yeah. That's honestly one of the bigger reservations for me about Stargate is like, what are we going to talk about? You know?
Yeah, it's a character show, not a theme show.
Yeah, it's really more like a motif show. I think there's stuff we can talk about with like the Egyptomania stuff, and they're starting to incorporate like other older civilization stuff and like the military stuff. But like those aren't themes; those are motifs. Trappings, motifs, that kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, my second chunk here is related to characters. So let's talk about the clunks, hunks, punks, and spunks of both shows. Okay, which one had the bigger clunks, characters that were dorkier in a fun way?
Absolutely Stargate for number of clunks.
Yeah.
Yeah, Alias has one perfect clunk and everyone else is playing it so serious.
Yeah. Now, what about the hunks? What's the hunkier cast?
It depends on what you're into. You know, like hot snake men. I think Teal'c is hot. I think
Teal'c is an unbeatable hunk.
Yeah, but I mean, Sydney does look really good. And the funny thing about Sydney Bristow, by the way, is a little quick side note, is like Jennifer Garner has always had the reputation for being like the sweet sort of girl next door, friendly, beautiful eyes, nice smile kind of girl. I really do struggle to see her as like a grizzled badass because I'm so used to 13 going on 30 Garner and like Jennifer Garner in the media. Like she's very big on charity and stuff. And I'm like,
yeah,
the scene where she's like, pull my teeth out.
The scene where she's fighting the guy in the parking garage, and it felt like every one of her reactions was, "Oh, whoops, shoot, did I?
Yeah.
How do I do this?" It was such a strange. I don't know if it was how I was reading it, how it was directed, how she was performing it, but it didn't feel like a cool. And you could say like, well, she hadn't been fighting for a couple months, so maybe that's what was going on there. But yeah, definitely did not read her as like the super badass, walking Swiss Army knife spy lady.
I think this goes to Stargate.
Yeah, I think so too. Now, what about the punks, the characters that are rebellious, that are fighting against the system?
That's absolutely Alias. That's the premise of Alias.
That's Alias. And then spunks. So which, the characters that are plucky, that are kind of young and that kind of thing. Like
that's Alias. They're
spunky.
Younger. They're overall younger. The thing that's like fun, and this isn't a knock against Stargate, but they're like in their 30s and 40s and 50s, right?
Yeah,
like they have day jobs, and I think that's funny, but that means that they're not spunky or plucky.
Yeah. Okay, so that's halfway done. So now let's talk about the foundations of the show that they're going to build on. Okay. The clues, crews, hues, and shoes. Okay, so which one of these shows... There's more clues. There's more things that we want to follow and explore and unravel as the show goes on. It's probably Alias, right?
Yep.
Okay, crews. So this is like the ensemble dynamics. What do we want to? Who do we want to hang out with more?
Stargate, 100%.
That's Stargate, I think. Easy peasy. Hues. So like, which one has more kind of thematic range or more types of episodes? Like, it could do the funny or the serious or the sad or the whatever, the mystery, or it can like explore different zones.
Yeah.
And then shoes is kind of like, which one's got the big shoes on, like which one can kind of walk the farthest with its base premise. Who's going to get more mileage out of the core concept?
Who has the longer runway? And I think that's definitely Stargate.
Yeah. Stargate's got the big shoes. Okay, last is like all the other kind of, adornments and decorations and other features here. The fits, hits, its, and wits. So how do you feel about the fits? Costumes, props? Which one do you like more?
I think Stargate overall wins because those snake outfits are awesome. I mean, like, it's funny because Alias is a show about outfit changes and personality changes.
Yeah. Alias holds its own here, but it just has to be too real, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly.
Hits, which one do you think made better use of music? Where'd you enjoy the music?
I think we might disagree on this. I think this is Alias.
I'll give it to Alias. I think I like Stargate more, but I'll concede to Alias here. Now the it's IT''S as in it's so and so. Who do you think makes better use of the cast or guest stars?
So far, it's Stargate. Like, what is Bradley Cooper's deal in this pilot?
Yeah, that was a little confusing. And Don S. Davis is just chef's kiss.
Love him.
And then the wits. So which show kind of has like the better writing or better lines?
That's Alias.
Yeah, neither of them really wowed me in that department. I'll give it to Alias there. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if we tabulate the scores here, according to this system, it looks like Alias ended up getting 7 points and Stargate got 9.
Okay.
So I don't know if that means anything, but
okay. Here's what I'm going to say. We've now discussed what makes these shows different, what's similar about them, and what we prefer about one versus the other. I think that there's no question left for us to ask other than who wins. And I think that the way that we can do this is we both write out our answer to each other in a Discord DM, and we're going to count down and hit send at the same time.
Okay.
And if we disagree and we hit a tie, then we continue to discuss. And if we have the same answer, then we're done and we can go on to next week.
Great.
So I've typed my answer into the chat.
Me too.
3, 2, 1, send. Easy.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Stargate SG-1.
I do. This is tough. I mean, so I was talking to a class of mine earlier this week about this book called 4,000 Weeks. It's a book about how you have 4,000 weeks to live. And so you need to adopt a mindset of kind of like accepting and embracing the limits of your life so that you can enjoy the time you actually have.
Right.
And it feels like that's what a lot of this season is, right? Mm-hmm. Is we're kind of, not that we're saying we're never going to watch Alias, but if a show that long doesn't win season 16, I don't know in what other context it's going to be covered on chats, right?
We gave it as much of a chance as we could possibly give it.
Yeah, which is a bummer because I'm very interested in the show. So I could see a world where like we do something where it's like we give shows that we watch the pilot of a second episode to impress us or something, like maybe other things we piloted for pilot chats or other things we counted out that people are strongly advocating for. It's like, all right, we'll give it, a round 2 or a episode 2 or whatever to wow us again. So I could see that. I could see myself watching Alias for a while, but also we just might not, and we might have to accept that our life is limited. We only have 4,000 weeks, and we're going to spend about 100 of them on Stargate or whatever.
God, when you say it like that.
Yeah.
Do you have our bracket available? What document is our bracket in?
I do have it available. It's in our launch episode thing. I also made a challenge that I can send you the link for.
Yeah,
later.
I'll put that in the description.
Great.
I won't update it until the episode's out, though. But yeah. So Stargate advances to the next round, which is exciting. Congratulations, Stargate. I'll finally get to watch the second episode. Yes.
So we'll see how that goes. Next time around, we are going to be discussing our 8th and 9th seed shows, our 8th seed Misfits, and our 9th seed Heroes. So do you want to read the Misfits summary? I'll read the Heroes summary.
This is the Misfits pilot. It's just episode 1 or 1.1, series 1, episode 1. 5 young adolescents begin community service under the watchful eye of their probation officer when a freak storm strikes them, granting them supernatural abilities.
Awesome. And then Heroes, season 1, episode 1, Genesis. A genetics professor in India discovers that there are people with superpowers as people realize their extraordinary strengths.
God, I'm so excited to watch Heroes, finally.
Me too.
I'm not letting it dictate which one I want to watch more of. I don't think it does, but I'm more... Just because I've watched the pilot of Misfits a couple years ago for this,
right.
doesn't mean I don't want to watch more of it. So we're going to find out. Save the cheerleader, save the world.
So next week, you're actually going to hear us discuss Star Trek TNG season 6?
Yep. 6.
Star Trek TNG season 6 is next week. Mm-hmm. The week after, you'll hear us discuss the pilots for Misfits and Heroes to figure out which one moves on to round 2. So yes, look forward to that.
Things to look forward to for next week, season 6. I'm about a third of the way through it right now as of this recording, and I'm really liking it. It has good and bad moments just like any other season, and you can tell that DS9 was out. So, what does that mean? Find out next week on Trek Chats. Blink, 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 blink. All right, cool. But John, where can people find you on the podcast here?
You can find me on another show called Super Smash Echoes that I do with my friend Justin, where we play video games related to the Super Smash Brothers franchise, Super Smash Echoes. Check it out. What about you?
I'm on a couple other podcasts, GameLineMedia.com, The Creature Quorum. Me and Six talk about creatures from video games. Talking Marketing, AMABoston.org. Me and a bunch of marketing people every other month talk about marketing and work and labor and passion and all sorts of fun stuff. That show is currently on a summer break, but I just put out a great episode with Neil Schaefer in June. So we'll be back in like September or October probably with more Talking Marketing. I can take the chats plugs on this week if you don't mind.
Please do.
Great. Well, if you have questions, comments, or concerns for us, our email address is chatspod@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @chatspod, and that's our handle on most social media platforms, ChatZPod. It's also where we can be found on YouTube, Chats of Television podcast. We're uploading episodes of Should You Watch and hopefully other things in the near future. And hey, if you like the show and you want to keep up with season 16 or the rest of Chats and support us, consider rating us on your podcast platform of choice, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Really helps us out, gets the word out there, more people on the boat with us. If you have the financial means, please consider supporting us at Patreon, patreon.com/chatspod. $1, $3, and $5 a month. We have different tiers. We have bonus content. We have movie commentaries. We pilot things like we're doing right here, but in a shorter format. We just hang out and talk about not TV stuff sometimes. We get deep. We get heavy. We get silly. We eat weird food. Magellan almost dies and eats too much olive oil. It's great. And if you're $5 a month or more over there, then you get thanked on every main feed episode of Chats. And as of today, our $5 plus patrons include Arthur, Emerus, Jen, Justin, Kat, Lee, Magellan's mom, Marcus, May Louise, Michael, Nick and Pat of the Brothers at Infinite War, Six, and Stefan. Thank you all for supporting Chats. We really appreciate your money. All things Chats can be found at chatspod.com. And if you like our main feed art, it's been done by Camilla. She can be found at Camillastrator on social media if you want to look at her art elsewhere. And before we take it home, our final segment here is called Chatsums. It's named after the Vlasic Snackum snacking pickle. I just bought some pickles recently for snacking. It's great. I love them. That's not my Chatsum, though. Instead, I would like to ask you, Magellan, to give me your Chatsum for this week.
My Chatsum for this week is a streaming service. I just got to give a shout out to Pluto TV. You ever use it?
I think I have.
I don't think I ever. Well, I don't think I ever understood what it was. It's a streaming service that's free that mimics broadcast television, where there's like channels and things that are on at a certain time.
Yeah. What are you watching on there? What are you liking on there?
Well, here's what's fun about it is it perfectly simulates how I will watch cable nowadays, which is like I'm in a hotel room. I don't have anything else to do. I guess I'll watch TV. And that's kind of fun. I think it's great for giving, that little burst of the kind of TV the role play of having cable without actually paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really sick over the weekend, and there's a Jeopardy channel.
Oh,
you just
boy.
watch Jeopardy all day. Holy heck,
Oh.
that's fun. So I watched some Jeopardy, and then you know what? My girlfriend and I got a little sick of the Jeopardy, so we turned over to one of the reality TV channels, and we watched Storage Wars for the first time. Oh
Oh,
my gosh, the guys on Storage Wars are really misogynistic.
yeah.
And that show is like, not something I'm going to watch a ton of, but we flipped around to it because it was on the TV. And then we were flipping around last night and we watched a little bit of Charmed. And I'm
Whoa.
like, hold on, this is a perfect Chats show. Texted you about it a little bit. And then I went over to one of the nature channels and I just watched reptiles for like 15 minutes. I just looked at some crocodiles.
That's amazing. How are the crocodiles? Are they good?
They're okay. They're good. So Pluto TV, it has a limited library. I think what they do is they have certain episodes and certain movies that they like rerun a lot, because I saw like The Gladiator was on an action channel and like a historical movies channel or something.
Yeah.
And it was clear that the Jeopardy episodes that they were running are like the Tournament of Champions or like the Battle of the Decades or, like the kind of bigger episodes. So I would imagine if I watched a ton of Pluto TV, I would start to recognize some repeat stuff. But it's a fun, free, because I just recently like got Sling for a month so I could watch the NBA finals.
Okay.
And I was like, Sling, it's so fun to have channels. But Pluto TV lets you pretend that you have channels for free.
Is it just the catch is that it's all ad supported?
There's a lot of ads. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So
Well, if we ever decide to watch Charmed, I'll definitely be checking out Pluto TV more often. But
I think it also has Star Trek on it for free.
now hold on, we're paying $700 a month for Paramount Plus,
I know.
and there are still ads on the ad-free version because they're ads for Paramount Plus shows. Anyways, speaking of Star Trek, I just want to briefly shout out Strange New World Season 2, which just started and is very good. That's not my Chatson for this week, though, because I've already probably Chatson with Strange New Worlds. I have a brand new Chatson for you guys. And by brand new, I mean a podcast that I listened to 7 years ago. It's called Beautiful Stories from Anonymous People. So, Magellan, do you remember this podcast?
Beautiful Anonymous, the Chris Gethard show?
Yeah. Did you know he still does it?
That's awesome.
It's still so good. So, Magellan knows what I'm talking about. Chris Gethard, comedian, podcaster, very funny, nice guy, seemingly from what I've heard. Host of that great episode of the Chris Gethard Show, the one with the plot twist that everybody likes, with the guy in the trash. If you're into comedy podcasts, you've heard of Chris Gethard. He has had this podcast since about 2016 called Beautiful Stories from Anonymous People, shortened to Beautiful Anonymous, where the premise is that he in the studio receives calls. He tells people, hey, I'm accepting calls, and he has to pick up, and he cannot hang up. He gives them 1 hour, and he'll talk about whatever the person wants to talk about, and the other person can hang up, but he can't. And it starts out as sort of a weird comedy podcast, but from I think actually episode 1, he set the tone, because the first episode is about like a guy in his early 20s who doesn't do anything with his life and is depressed about it. And you get to hear Chris be like, I'm begging you to live your life while you still can. And it's very inspiring and very emotional in the ways that you don't get out of like podcasts usually. It's just a show that it asks you to empathize with strangers. And so I've been listening now back to like the listeners compiled a like best of Beautiful Anonymous list. And I've been listening through those. And then I'm going to try and listen to the current ones. I don't expect to stick with it forever, but it's just great to have this little box of interview podcasts and discussion podcasts that were really inspiring to me getting started in terms of like how I wanted to talk to people online and what kind of podcasts I was interested in doing. And it's been great background listening as my other podcasts have like slowed down releases. So Beautiful Stories from Anonymous People. Check it out if that premise sounds interesting to you. And that's what we got, folks. Thank you to Magellan for being the round 1 pick winner to my round 1 pick loser, because one of us has to move on. Anyways, thanks guys for listening to Chats. We'll be back next week with round 2. Peace.